It was just the start of their shift, but before the Kentucky cops had time to react, they spotted a desperate young man running toward them. Frightened, they prepared for action. But as the man spoke, they quickly realized the young father was asking for help. He spoke in broken English, so they could barely understand him. He motioned for officers to follow him and ran down the street. But when the cops saw what the man's problem was, it changed her life forever. Officers Noah Cole and Nick Green served with the Louisville Metro Police Department in Kentucky. Although their patrols were usually uneventful, and they were rarely faced with a life-threatening situation, this shift was to prove very different. They didn't even have time to adjust to their shift when the distraught young father ran towards them. As they followed him and saw what was going on with their own eyes, all their experience and knowledge accumulated in the force was put to the test. The two officers, Cole and Green, were partners and good friends. They patrolled the streets together, relied on each other, and always stood in a row. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. They had known each other for years and had developed a bond that only cops working together could match. They'd been through some of the worst situations imaginable, and they had gotten through them together. But as this tragic situation unfolded, could they do the right thing this time? Officer Cole and Officer Green began each patrol shift by visiting all local businesses in the area and checking in with each business owner. Officers happened to be in Shorty's supermarket when the man ran in screaming that something was wrong. Because the man spoke Spanish and knew only a few words of English, officers had trouble understanding him. But what they did get from the desperate man was the look of absolute horror on his face. When the desperate man came screaming into the store, the officers tried to calm him down. All they could understand was that he was asking for help. The officers tried to understand the situation better before blindly going in, but it was no use. All they knew was that the man's expression told them it was serious. The man continued to yell in Spanish and motioned for police officers to follow him to his car. But Officer Green couldn't help but grow suspicious. What if it was a trap? Of course, the officials wanted to help. It was their sworn duty to protect the neighborhood. But helping the man proved difficult because they couldn't understand what he was saying. Officer Green looked around frantically, trying to find someone who understood Spanish to help bridge the language barrier. But the man became more and more hectic. Finally, they decided to follow him. Whatever it was clear that they had to act immediately. Although the police couldn't understand what the man was saying, they managed to catch the words baby and no bueno. With these words, they managed to realize that it was a baby in trouble. Officer Green was a father himself. Hearing the words, his heart sank. The man told them his baby was not good. With a queasy feeling, he and his partner realized that things were about to get serious. Officers had no choice. They had to follow the panicked man outside to see what was going on. They followed him out into the street and saw him leading them to a parked car. When they reached the vehicle, they were greeted by a horrific scene. Officers were able to see the baby, but the young father became even more excited as he approached, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. In the back of the car was a woman crying hysterically. She was holding a baby in her arms. When officers tried to ask her what was going on, she desperately pushed the child into Officer Green's arms. The baby looked very young, only about a week old. When they saw the baby's face, they knew they had to help. But what happened to the child? They had to know exactly what was wrong. Officials couldn't afford to waste another minute. The scene unfolding before them was horrific, and the baby's life depended on their next move. When the two officers became active, it changed the lives of the young parents forever. It was an extremely unusual situation, and one that no officer on duty would ever want to face. On that day, the police officers not only changed the parents' lives, but they themselves would change forever. The baby was limp and lifeless in Officer Green's arms. You had to act now. They assessed the situation as best they could, but they still didn't know what had happened to the baby and couldn't get the potentially life-saving information out of the parents. Nonetheless, the sight of the lifeless baby prompted their years of training to kick in, and they knew exactly what to do. But time wasn't on their side. Would they be fast enough? One of the officers tried to turn on the radio but couldn't, so his partner Cole did all the talking on the radio while he tried to revive the baby. He couldn't talk on the radio, but when he heard the baby come back, crying after CPR, the officer said,
"Oh, we've got it. We've got it."
From then on, things looked good. When the baby started crying and moaning, the police officer noticed that oxygen was getting into the brain, so the difficult part seemed over. Hearing the baby's cry and realizing that he was breathing was amazing for the two officers and the young parents. That was the ultimate sign of relief. Nothing could have gone better. Thanks to Cole's quick work, a replacement soon arrived. EMS examined the child, and she was taken to the hospital for further monitoring. The baby, named Emma, was barely a week old, and officers didn't know what caused her to stop breathing. However, according to the family, she was taken back home and doing well. It's impossible to know if the officers were in the right place, at exactly the right time, or if the terrified parents were specifically looking for them, but Green surmised that they must have seen the police cars parked outside the supermarket and reported themselves at help. Green and Cole stressed that this life-saving interaction was just another day's work. Binding bonds through beautiful tales. Thank you for watching.